Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. We are from Group 5. My name is Gandhi Sadila. My friends are Alif, Nordia Satria, and Pavan Mahendra. Today we will talk about establishing rules and routines. Now let's begin. Routines are the backbone of daily classroom life. They facilitate teaching and learning. Routines don't just make your life easier, they save valuable classroom time. And what is most important, efficient routines make it easier for students to learn and achieve more. Learning to Teach, Not Just for Beginners by Linda Shalloway. Now, when routines and rules are carefully thought, modeled, and established in the classroom, children knows what is expected of them and how to do certain things on their own. Having these predictable patterns in the classroom allows teachers to spend more time in meaningful instruction for the students. Now, based on the study of Ammer, Everton, and Anderson in 1980, an effective classroom management had clear rules for general conduct and procedures of routine for carrying out specific tasks. And effective managers usually spend time, a few days of the start, to teach rules and routines to the students. Now, from that, we know that the rules and routines are very important and in creating an effective and efficient classroom for the students. Now, let's continue. Now, there are reasons why teachers struggle in classroom management. The first one is not establishing rules and routines in the classroom, and they do not understand the rules or understand the differences between them. Now, talk about it further. What is the difference? The difference of rules and routine is that classroom rules are about the overall conduct in the classroom, and routine is more specific about tasks and how the task should be done or accomplished. Not establishing any of both or differentiating them will result in a chaotic classroom and a loss of time and a loss of learning time. Now, those are the reasons why sometimes teachers struggle in managing classroom. Now, first we need to talk about classroom rules. There are some guidelines in developing classroom rules. The first one here, we need to talk about develop a reasonable number of rules. The first point is to make the rules has 4 to 6 points. The reason is because if there are too many rules, it would cause the class to be too rigid, and it is hard for the students to remember it all. And if it is too few, some critical behavior aspect could possibly not be covered. That is why it is important to make rules consist of 4 to 6 points. Now, next point is the rules needs to congruent with school-wide rules. Why? Because if the classroom rules and the school-wide rules doesn't congruent with each other, it would be harder for the teacher to explain the classroom rules to the students, and it would create a misunderstanding sometimes. Now, next thing we need to consider in developing rules is to decide how to word the rules. The first thing we need to consider is avoid the use of no and not or negative language, and use positive language. Now, the reason why is because using positive language could result in positive classroom environment, and it is emphasized good behavior. And the rules with negative language works in contrast, and it emphasizes bad behavior. That is why we need to use positive language and avoid using no and not. Now, talking about wording, there are 2 rules of wording that we can use. The first one is general wording, or general terms. General terms refer to many situations. The example is be a good friend, do your best, and respect others. General terms has some advantages as it is cover more situations and behaviors, but general terms sometimes could be ambiguous. As an example, the rule, be respectful. If a student was feeling too excited and disrupted each other, It could be that the student who disrupt the other doesn't mean to disrupt others, doesn't really mean it, doesn't really mean to be disrespectful. That is why sometimes general rules could be ambiguous. Now, the second term is specific terms. Specific term focuses on particular situation. As an example, we walk at all times, follow direction the first time they are given, and one person speaks at a time. So, from that we know that the terms that we can use has difference in the general terms covers many different situations, and specific terms only focuses on particular or certain situation. Now, let's continue. The third thing we need to consider in making rules is to consider students' general background. Now, some rules might make sense within one cultural group, but sometimes it could be not making any sense in another group. As an example, in Hawaiian customs, it is common for children and the parents to interrupt each other while talking in building ideas. If we apply the rule, respect each other, it would clash with the Hawaiian custom and it would create misunderstanding. That is why sometimes we need to take extra time to discuss, explain, and teach the rules to the students, especially if the rules contrasted with some students' customs. That is all from me. Next will be explained by my friend.
Okay, number 4, teach and demonstrate each rule. A teacher needs to explicitly teach the student what the rules are and how to interpret them. It is by discussing it with the students so a rule could be interpreted or understood by all students in the same way. As an example, the rule, respect each other. The teacher may interpret this to mean that students should not call each other by name. But some students may not think that the rule applies to name calling because they may think of it as teasing rather than as disrespect. A teacher needs to show the appropriate behaviors, what will count as violation of the rules, and make sure that every situation understands why it is important. Number 5 is post the rule in prominent spot. It is important to make sure students understand and remember the rules. So it is important that the rules to be placed where all the students can see them easily, as it could remind them all the time. Next is number 6, decide whether to give student a voice. There are pros and cons in involving the student on developing the rules. By involving the student, it would be time consuming, but they will be more likely to follow the rules. Conversely, generating the rules by the teacher alone could create the rules which exactly needed by the teacher to teach. Okay, next is the developing classroom rules. The example which illustrate how 3 successful teachers use different appropriate. The first is Amy teaching the first grade. Amy thinks it is important for students to be involved in the rule development, but she needs to make sure some certain rules still be in the final list. Okay, first, Amy read the book Never Spit on Your Shoes by Dennis Kazet about a little dog and his mom that talks about the making of classroom rules to the class. Amy then has the class brainstorm a long list of classroom rules and they generate or create 20 rules. She explained that the 20 rules for the first graders in this year are too many to remember and they need to think about it some more. The next day, Amy asked them why they hope to learn in the first grade, and then she explained that classroom rules need to be applied to learn them. After that, she talks about the 20 rules again and said that she will put them into three bigger categories, and which is first is do your best, and the second is be kind, and the third is be safe. Then she asked them to categorize the 20 rules into the bigger categories. After that, she works with the student by cutting up the 20 rules, lay them on the floor, and group them. After finish the rule grouping, Amy asked the student how students think if the three big categories be used as the actual classroom rules, and they agree. Then Amy creates the rules chart and the students sign it. Lastly, the rules are displayed in the classroom. That is the first example. The second example is the teacher's name Annie. She teaches 5th grade. First, Annie makes the student help generating classroom rules to encourage them to be accountable for their action. On the first day, she creates class meeting and students decide to be appropriate behavior. She begins by asking the student to generate possible rules. The frequently suggested rules are no running, no hitting, no name calling, which state in negative language, and ask the student are they ever been tired being told what they must not do. And the student answer yes. Next, she asks them could they remake the rules in what they must not do, but rather in the what they need to do. And the student became more excited and generate more ideas. Then from the generated ideas, Annie create code of discipline which cite in positive manners. The code of discipline is we have the responsibility to be safe, to keep the others safe, to do our schoolwork, to show respect for ourselves and others, to take care of the things around us and make our school a peaceful place. The code then posted on the wall and the student recite it once a week. And the third is Tim. He teaches 9th grader, especially in history. Tim uses simple, standard, clear rules which could minimize the opportunity of misunderstanding or misinterpretation. In his classroom, he ensures that the rules he considers necessary to teach effectively exist in his classroom. He primarily uses teacher-generated rules. He creates the rules beforehand and then posts them in the prominent spot so it could easily be seen by the student since the first day. The rules are: first, follow direction the first time they are given. The second is come to class prepared. The second is respect others and their property. The fourth is use appropriate language, and the final is do not leave the room without permission. Lastly, he introduce, demonstrate, and discuss their importance of each rule on the first day. That's all for me. Thank you.
Okay, now I will continue explanation. Now enter the classroom routines. Routines are important to the overall fluidity of the class. It shows how to carry out tasks in efficient and orderly manner. There are three routines categories. First is a movement routines. It provides students with explicit steps for entering, exiting, and moving about classroom. Example of the steps: to get a drink, request permissions, take hall pass, return within 2 minutes, and return the hall pass. Next, the number 2, there is a lesson running routines. It is designed to facilitate regular tasks during instructional lessons. These routines vary depending on the instruction types, whole class, small group, or individual. For example, the procedure to get students' attention differs when students work in groups and individual. The third is general procedures. It includes all routines for the teacher and the students to make the class run smoothly. As an example, taking attendance which is not a part of a lesson and also not involving movement in the classroom. Next, we enter the developing classroom routines. There are three examples of key classroom routines. First examples is Amy, first grade. Initial arrival. Students arrive in the morning, unpack and find a seat in a group meeting area. Next, restroom and drinks. Students can use lavatory or get a drink whenever they need as long as they place a signature pass on their desk to be recognized by Amy if someone is outside. Next is assigning and copying homework. At the end of every day, Amy gives the students 7 or 8 minutes to copy or organize the day's homework into the homework notebooks. The second example is Ant in the 5th grade. Initial arrival. When her students arrive, they do first unpack their bag, second, turn any important notes to teacher, third, put homework in homework bin, fourth, sharpen pencils, and fifth, begin the do now listed on the board. Next is restroom and drinks. Students only use bathroom only at the beginning or the end of a lessons. They sign out and clipboard on the door and then sign in when they return. Next is assigning and copying homework. Any design a specific area of chalkboard for posting homework and reminders. At the end of a class, students write their homework on their homework notebooks. The third example is Tim in 9th grade. In initial arrival, students sit on their desk and work on do now on the board. After the bell rings, Tim reviews it, show the connection to the previous lesson, and then begin the lesson. The next is restroom and drinks. Everyone, or one at a time, is free to go to the restroom as long they promise to not breaking any rules. Tim use vacant and occupied sign on the door to be flipped. Next is assigning and copying homework. Tim use class web to post a week's worth assignment. He only needs last minutes of the class to remind the students of the homework. Okay, now we enter the next part of explanation, that is in the student voice. 4X students stated that establishing classroom rules is essential to create and maintain an orderly, safe, and productive classroom. As an addition, there of the 4 students believe that it is important for students to be involved in the creation of the rules, but the last student concerned that the change for students to be involved in the rules creation could be misused. Okay, now we're entering the explanation of a key point. There are 3 categories of routines. First, there is a classroom. Next is a movement, and then there is a lesson running routines. Then there is a teach and demonstrate and practice each routine with your students. Remember, when developing classroom rules, ensure the following. First, develop between 4 and 6 rules. Second, make classroom rules consistent with school-wide rules. Third, write the rules using positive language. 4. Consider students' cultural backgrounds. 5th, teach to demonstrate each rules. 6th, post the rules in a prominent spots. And the last, decide whether to include the students in the development of rules. Classroom rules and routines both communicate an expectation about behavior. Classroom rules are aimed at preventing some type of misbehavior. I think that's our presentation from our group. Thank you for watching. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.